So good afternoon. Um, I guess I am between you and lunch, but then I found out there's one more group, so I'm off the hook. Um, I don't have too many slides. I just have a few just to get us kind of the context going and then talk about what we have done in IBM across the enterprise and specifically also in India. So let me just start with that. What's happening in the industry outside of us is technology is changing our lives. We are a technology company, but it's also changing us from the inside out. As you can see, analytics, cognitive, coming in a big way into HR. Society has gone mobile, social, security is important, Internet of Things, and of course the cloud. This is creating new experiences for the employees. So as a HR professional, we look at what's that doing to the employee, and it's disrupting our models. It's disrupting our models really, really fast. It used to be a traditional value chain, linear, you do one task at a time, and now it's just all over the place, right? And this is what's happening outside. So what did we do in HR? We started embracing the cognitive cloud solutions to see what's the best of breed practices that we can use. And of course, being IBM, cognitive, Watson, all of it came into play. And just 10 seconds on what that is, because I think there's a lot happening in the AI space and machine learning space, and always get a lot of questions on, is this AI or is this machine learning? They all go hand in hand. Cognitive computing is all about understanding, reasoning, and then really the machine part of it comes in saying, okay, I can learn this, and then it starts interacting. It's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a little bit of time. So let's see what that does. So it understands. So we have tons of data. Every company has tons of data inside. So bringing disparate data together, reasoning on that data, not just building hypotheses, but reasoning around it, and then learning so that it can then bring it back to HR, to the employees, to the enterprise. So that's what we're doing here. So I'm broadly going to talk about 4 or 5 areas that we have really embraced technology in IBM, starting with talent acquisition. So this is where we have brought in Watson, and it had 2-3 attributes that we wanted to drive. One was, of course, to build efficiency. Those are the measures, right? You want to do things faster, you want to do things cheaper, you want to do things better. But really it was also about identifying and removing bias. There's a lot of bias in talent acquisition. It could be the hiring manager, it could be the recruiter, the sourcer, etc. So removing bias was actually the way we started, but then all the other things came along with it. So how do you make the life of a sourcer or a recruiter easier? And then how do you get the hiring manager? So suppose they choose one candidate, can the tool now suggest 10 more candidates who fit that profile? Alternatively, if you're a candidate, can we suggest 10 jobs that you may not have looked for, right? So it kind of starts doing that. Next thing is about learning. Learning used to be very traditional. The organization said these are the new skills, so you push them on this way, and then you started, tracking it and making sure everyone did that. But it was a horrible experience. It was very enterprise driven. It was not driven, from the employee. So we flipped that whole thing and came up with a platform called Your Learning. Uses a lot of cognitive tools behind it, almost 40 to 50 data points that it brings together. And it's almost like a Netflix. So there are things we can push, but more importantly, it made it social. So it tells you what your peers are doing. It tells you what, based on your aspirations, what you can pull and learn. So it's all tiles. So you can say, this is what I want to do this quarter, this is what I want to do next. Most importantly, it starts talking to our talent acquisition tools. So then it starts building supply and demand. It starts saying, okay, these are the jobs that are there. This is what you can learn to get those jobs. So it starts bringing that across the enterprise. Rewards, well, before I go there, Checkpoint was our performance management system. We used to have the traditional performance management system where once a year you sat across your manager and spoke about things you did, well, not so well, etc. But what we did find in this new age where things are getting shorter, technology is changing faster than you can learn, you had to break that up. You had to break those conversations up into feedback on performance and feedback on development. So we started looking at what can we do, and here we're using success factors across the board. Almost it's like WhatsApp. So it's an iterative process. We expect managers and their reportees to talk often, not once a year, not once a quarter, but maybe once after a project, when they roll on, roll off, new client, etc. So we're doing a lot of that, and it's been very successful. We've implemented that in about 3 years across the enterprise. Rewards and recognition. This is one area a lot of us struggle with as practitioners. We expect managers to know their employees, and then they tell us, okay, who should get what. But we had so much of data with us, predictive analytics that we can bring to bear, cognitive analytics that we can say who's at the highest risk of leaving us and for what reason. Right? So it again uses about 35, 40 data points. Could be what's in the system, where you come from, what's your aspirations, your current performance, what are you learning, etc., and brings that together and gives those data points to the manager, saying, hey, out of the 10 guys that you have, these two, for these two different reasons, are probably going to attract. So those are things that we can then bring together. And lastly, IBM's always stood for inclusion, diversity, and that's one of our pillars. And it's not just, it's a business imperative for us. So that's something where we are also, again, using technology to drive a lot of the initiatives, to drive a lot of the bias out of the system and get those in there. Okay. So what is all this doing? I spoke about it from an HR professional perspective, but what is it really doing for an employee? Lot of things went to self-service. So there's My Insight, Workday, Chip, and what this is doing is it's allowing employees to have a very different experience. Mica is my career advisor. So instead of talking to HR or your manager, which you still do, you can actually look at it enterprise-wise. You can say, hey, these are my skills, and Mica already knows your skills because it's already there in the system. Mica already knows how you're performing against those skills. It takes your aspirations and then says, okay, here are 10 other things you can look at. Or here's a cluster of skills that you're most closely related to in terms of roles. So it starts driving those hypotheses and testing, and it feeds back after a year when you took that new role, if you did well or not, right? So it starts learning. Blue matching, while we spoke about talent acquisition, we are a large company. We have lots of employees also looking for roles. So how do you get people to match to roles that are available internally, right? So I can, as an employee, go and put in my attributes, and the system already knows a lot of things about me, but my aspirations, my constraints, and then you can say, okay, here are 10 things you can look for. So it starts doing that. Spoke a little bit about talent retention, and of course, it's all about building the success profiles by job, by skill, by role, and then matching that, bringing that to bear. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about learning because we are in a fight for talent. Technology is changing fast, and learning is no longer, as far as I'm concerned, it's not learning anymore, it's hygiene. You have to stay relevant. So the old system used to be top-down, permission-driven. It goes to the manager for approval, and then it starts working its way down. The new way of doing it is more organic, it's digital. it's not just internal content. It can be content from anywhere, from multiple sources, multiple segments, all data-driven coming together. Right? So the vision really was to have a single go-to digital marketplace that's multi-tiered. It gives you the support that's required to build the skills and transform careers. And we had it on 3 tiers. One was the short term. So this was, how are you doing in your current job? What are the skill sets that you need? Are you green on your current job? Then building your skills, that may be for the next job, and then really transforming and getting a career path, which is not just your next job, but the next to next job. So I spoke a little bit about how it works. It's a very open platform. We made this into small bits. So our consumption went up nearly, a few hundred points, doubled and then tripled, because it wasn't a one size fit all. So there could be one person who wanted things in a classroom. There's another person who will want the same content on a blog while, or a podcast while they're driving home. So it's able to bring all of this together and deliver in the way you want to consume it. It's also able to push multiple areas together. So it could be internal, external, maybe even competition to bring their material together. And it personalizes learning. It allows you to bite the way you want it, when you want it, available on your desktop, mobile, any tool that you need, right? And it's all about user experience. It's not about an organization saying go learn. It's about the employee coming back and saying this is what I'm going to learn. Okay, so these are again, this is my last slide. It's about a learning journey. It's about creating, how to start it, where to find it, how is it delivered, and then eventually the impact. And that's what we're all aiming for. It's the engagement, performance, and retention of that employee at the end. Okay, I'm going to pause there. If there's any questions, I know I spoke quite fast, but I was seeing a lot of folks nodding, so I figured you're keeping up. So, any questions?
I have one.
Sure.
It's pertaining to the mica.
Okay.
Chaitanya, my name is Varinder Verma. I'm from Maruti Suzuki. My question is pertaining to the mica which you have discussed, so I'm very passionate to know about it. So, how, from where, we consume the data for its maturity? So, like, what was the data source, one? And secondly, while, doing a black box testing, what was the sample size taken where it's fairly getting it, to be more effective and productive?
Yeah. So, we realized we have a lot of data across systems, not necessarily talking to each other, and not necessarily connecting the dots. We are also a large company. We are units within units and across the world. So what mica, the way we did it is we actually started it with one unit, and then one country, one region, and then across. So when we first started, it was very small. Maybe 2,000 was our sample size that we started with. And then, we kind of just went across the enterprise. The key is bringing disparate systems together. The unique identifier is you, but then saying, okay, what have you learned in the last 24 months? What is your aspirations? What do you want to do? How are you faring in your current job? So your performance also comes in. And then looking at bringing all those together to give a conclusion to the employee. So that really is how, it's about 40 data points that it goes across.
What is the overall efficiency of the system process mica is a chatbot?
It is little more than a chatbot. So you ask question, it goes, looks you up, and then comes back. So it's a little bit more than a chatbot. Okay. Any other questions?
You spoke about talent acquisition, during this talent acquisition, about the biasness and all that. So how do you feel? Like I feel personally that yes, there would be certainly biasness would be there when the talent acquisition would be there, because the data which we put in is we ourselves, we are giving it that input to the system. So just wanted to have that clarification, more clarification into that part. When we have a lot of bulk hiring and all that part, specifically for the bulk hiring.
So today, lots of data is available, not just what you put in. There's a social profile, there are portals. So, keeping confidentiality in mind, we have to be very careful and sensitive to that. There's individual privacy. But you're able to go build a profile very quickly, and it's two parts to it. One is, how is internal behavior working? So is there a particular manager who's biased, right? We have the data. And the second part is, if you are suppose picking 2 resumes out of 10, then there's a pattern on why you picked that. So it kind of works that way, right? So then it starts connecting and saying, okay, you said this is a success, so let me give you 10 more that you have not seen that's out there, right? So it starts creating those profiles. And it learns as it goes. Based on the JDs. Yeah. Okay, I see a red light flashing. Sure.
On this particular slide, purposely designed learning journeys.
Yeah.
Now, within that, what are you seeing, especially on the delivery types, what are you seeing as a change, let's say over the last 2 or 3 years, amongst the various delivery types? And I'm curious to know, how the mix is changing from what is happening, by the individual within the content that might be readily available. I'm consuming that vis-a-vis what today is the face-to-face or the cohort sort of journey. So what would roughly be the mix that you're seeing?
First thing, in our industry, I'm talking about IT services, millennials are 60% or above as a workforce constituent. So a lot of it goes there. What we see is a very big shift into small bit-sized learning, from big, large classrooms to smaller bits. So the consumption is going up. The mix of classroom versus portal online, I would say it's still mixed. It is changing towards the portal because that's more efficient. But complex areas or deep areas, they still like the classroom, right? Because they want to go and interact. But what the portal does is now it creates an SME and starts pulling in virtual classrooms. So we see more, rather than physical classrooms, you're still getting that experience, but they're virtual classrooms. So there's a very big shift, small bite-sized learning, virtual classrooms, SMEs online. We see that shift happening.
Just a quick follow-up question, which is, based on all that you're learning in a very dynamic way, what are some 2, 3, top areas you're looking to enhance when it comes to making the learning processes more effective than what it might have been and what it might be today?
Well, I'm going to go a little beyond learning. I think the way we work is completely changing. Way the practitioners work, way HR works, the traditional roles are changing, and so is learning. Learning is not something you do once a quarter or once 6 months and get certified anymore. It's something that it'll pretty much something you do every day, like you brush. You'll have to update and upskill yourself. So that's the way we look at learning. It's not an event anymore. It's just part of hygiene. So that's the other big shift that we see. How you consume is changing, which means how you bring it together is changing. So that's the other big shift that we also see. And last, I think, the traditional way of learning, since that's changed, there's a lot of new roles that are coming in. We have web app developers in the learning team in HR. I don't think that role existed, a year ago. So there are a lot of new roles coming into learning as well and into HR. So that's the other thing that we are seeing. Okay, I think I'm out of time. Sure. Or I can, if I'm out of time, I can take it offline as well. Sure.
So my name is Shardula Ganguly and I run an executive search firm. I find that a lot of organizations that rely on artificial intelligence to do their hiring have algorithms that look at social visibility and therefore tend to hire people who are opinionated and tend to have a lot of opinions on all the social medias, which necessarily does not translate to attributes that are necessary for senior leadership. And in fact, in our generation, those were qualities which were not considered as leadership skills because it projects the self over the team. How do you, circumvent this in your algorithm?
So it's not a short question, but it has a long answer. That's exactly what it does, because it's not about going and picking or not picking the person who's opinionated or who's very active socially. It's taking multiple data points and then driving a view, and it's not making a decision for you. It's not saying hire or don't hire. It's giving you the data points that you can then make a better decision. Again, it again goes back. What if you need someone who's opinionated versus what's the baseline of the job? So it keeps going around that way. So it's actually an iterative process where you start looking at the JD, that's your starting point. Then you start looking at the requirements. It takes your previous successes and then starts building on it. So it's an iterative process. The other part is creating data sets, creating unbiased data sets. So if you are actually creating the data set with a bias, then the answers are also going to be biased. So creating those data sets that are unbiased is also critical. So there are ways to do that, and our research folks have been actually putting that in the public domain. So it's not just for us, anybody can use those data sets. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm around if there's any questions.